try to listen carefully because we're going to run through the whole series right here for you just once. This is Carson Hocevar.
Nobody expected Talladega to turn into a Cleetus McFarland story. Not like this. Not on the day Carson Hocevar finally got his first NASCAR Cup Series win. And definitely not in the middle of a post-race press conference, when one of the most talked about crossover names in motorsports suddenly called in and added another layer to one of the biggest moments of Hocevar's career. NASCAR confirmed that Hocevar got a celebratory call from his friend and racing colleague Cleetus McFarland during the press conference, and that alone tells you how strange, emotional, and memorable this whole Talladega weekend really was. Because this was not supposed to be the moment where everything came together. For weeks, the Talladega conversation had been about the usual superspeedway questions. Who could survive the draft? Who would avoid the big wreck? Who would time the final move correctly? Who would have the patience to stay in the fight until the end? But then Carson Hocevar went out and won the Jack Links 500, picking up the first Cup victory of his career in his 91st start. That is not a small storyline. That is a career-changing moment. That is the kind of win that changes how the garage talks about a driver forever. And that is why the reaction around Hocevar hit so hard. This win was not just another surprise result on a chaotic superspeedway day. It was Hocevar's first victory, his fourth top 10 finish of the 2026 Cup season, and his third top 10 in 6 Talladega Cup starts. That matters because it shows this was not just luck or a random plate race break. It was a driver who kept putting himself in the right place until finally the result broke his way. For a 23-year-old who has already become one of the sport's most talked about young personalities, that kind of breakthrough changes everything. And then, right after all of that, Cleetus McFarland called him. That is the kind of detail that makes the whole story feel bigger than racing. Because Cleetus is not some distant name on the edge of the sport anymore. Richard Childress Racing officially introduced Garrett Mitchell, better known as Cleetus McFarland, as part of its 2026 NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series program. And the team made clear that he is coming in with real racing credibility, not just online attention. RCR pointed out that he has more than 4.6 million YouTube subscribers, and has already built a racing resume with top 10 ARCA finishes at Talladega and Charlotte in 2025, plus a Truck Series debut at Daytona in 2026. That means every move he makes now carries more weight than before. So when people talk about Cleetus shocking Carson Hocevar, the real meaning is not that Cleetus stole the spotlight in some dramatic way. It is that he is now part of the same serious racing conversation as a first-time Cup winner. That is a massive shift. A year ago, the conversation around Cleetus McFarland was mostly about whether his popularity could translate into real stock car credibility. Now, he is tied to RCR's development path, he has official starts lined up, and NASCAR has already made decisions about where he is and is not cleared to run. After his Rockingham debut, NASCAR officials had not approved him for Talladega in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series yet, but he was cleared for short tracks, trucks, and ARCA. That tells you how the sport views his growth right now. Real, but still controlled. Progress, but with guardrails. And that is exactly why Talladega mattered so much for both of these stories at once. For Hocevar, it was the day he finally broke through and turned promise into proof. For Cleetus, it was another example of how fast the future can move when you keep showing up and improving. Because Talladega does not care about social media fame. It does not care about your audience. It does not care what people said about you last week. Talladega cares about drafting skill, patience, timing, and trust. It is a place where one mistake can destroy your whole race, and one smart move can put you in victory lane. That is why Hocevar's win was so important, and why Cleetus's role around it feels so unusual and so memorable. The emotional side of the night mattered too. NASCAR's own coverage showed that Hocevar was clearly feeling the weight of the moment after the win. The post-race video coverage highlighted that he was emotional after his first Cup victory, And another NASCAR video showed that he explained his Talladega celebration as a nod to Dale Earnhardt Jr. That detail matters, because it shows how much meaning Hocevar attached to the win. He did not treat it like just another race. He treated it like a personal milestone, something he had worked a long time to reach. That emotion made the Cleetus call even better, because by the time Cleetus got through to him in the press conference, Hocevar had already crossed the line from contender to winner. He had already answered the biggest question in his young Cup career, and now one of the people connected to his racing world was calling in right in the middle of that celebration. NASCAR even posted the moment directly, describing it as a celebratory call from Cleetus during Hocevar's post-win presser. It is hard to script a cleaner example of how fast modern NASCAR storylines move between the track, the media, and the online racing world. That is what makes this so interesting. Hocevar represents one lane of modern NASCAR. Young, aggressive, highly visible, and already part of the sport's next generation conversation. Jayski described him as the 23-year-old who scored the first Cup win of his career and noted that he became the second first-time winner in the last 3 races, giving Spire Motorsports another major boost and showing that the youth movement in the Cup Series is very real. That is a huge storyline all by itself. Cleetus represents another lane, a creator who built a giant audience first, then translated that audience into actual racing opportunities through ARCA, trucks, and now the O'Reilly Auto Parts series with RCR. He is still working through the approval process and the learning curve. But the fact that he has now reached the point where he is calling a first-time Cup winner during a post-race press conference says a lot about how far he has come. His name now matters in the garage in a way it simply did not a year or 2 ago. That is why this Talladega weekend felt bigger than just a win. It was a collision of 2 racing worlds. One world is traditional Cup Series competition, where a 23-year-old can finally break through and announce himself to the sport. The other world is the new motorsports ecosystem, where a huge digital personality can build real racing credibility and eventually become part of the official NASCAR ladder. Talladega brought those 2 worlds together in one weekend, and the result was one of the most talked about moments of the season. And now the pressure changes for both of them. For Hocevar, the first win means the target grows. People are going to expect more now. The story is no longer whether he can win. It is whether he can repeat it, whether he can build on it, and whether this was the start of a bigger run. Jayski's race summary makes clear that this was his first Cup victory and one of the most meaningful results of his season. Once a driver gets that first one, the rest of the garage starts racing them differently. For Cleetus, the pressure is different. He is still in the proving stage. RCR has already said he is part of a real developmental plan, and NASCAR has already shown that it wants to see more before giving him access to every type of track. But he also keeps finding ways to stay relevant, and that matters. He got top 10 ARCA finishes at Talladega and Charlotte in 2025, then made the truck debut at Daytona in 2026. And now he has a confirmed return to the O'Reilly Auto Parts series at Nashville Superspeedway on May 30 in the No. 33 Chevrolet. That means the story is still moving forward, and Talladega was not the end. It was another checkpoint that next race at Nashville now carries even more weight. Because after Talladega, people are watching differently. If Cleetus performs well again, the conversation gets even louder. If he struggles, people will still remember Talladega as the day he nearly changed everything. Either way, the pressure is real now, because he has built enough credibility that every start feels like part of a bigger career arc rather than a one-off appearance. That is what happens when a crossover figure stops being a curiosity and starts becoming a legitimate part of the racing discussion. And that is the deeper meaning behind the headline. Cleetus McFarland did not win Talladega. Carson Hocevar did. But Cleetus still ended up being part of the biggest emotional moment around it, because his call during the press conference showed that the racing world around Hocevar is now wide enough to include the internet side of motorsports too. That call was funny, surprising, and completely fitting for the moment. It connected the post-race emotion, the modern creator world, and the old-school NASCAR pressure all at once. So if you are asking what really happened at Talladega, the answer is simple. A young Cup driver finally got his first win. A creator-turned-racer played a direct part in the story's most memorable off-track moment. And NASCAR got another reminder that the sport is changing fast, with new faces, new personalities, and new ways of becoming relevant. Hocevar's first Cup win was historic for him personally, and Cleetus's call made it feel even more like a modern NASCAR milestone. And now, with Nashville next on the calendar for Cleetus, the story is not over. It is just getting started. If you want, I can now turn this into an even longer full 4,000 plus word version with a stronger opening, more suspense, and a more viral YouTube documentary pace.